Welcome back to Echoes of Ihsan. We're taking another deep dive, and today we're exploring the world of Islamic purification and prayer rituals. Really fascinating stuff. And we'll be guided by the wisdom of Sunan al Tirmidhi, Volume 1. It promises some incredible insights into practices that shape the daily lives of millions.
Yeah, it's amazing how this text emphasizes the connection between physical and spiritual purity. It's like before even delving into the specifics of prayer, it lays out all these meticulous guidelines for purification. You really get a sense of how cleanliness is like a prerequisite for connecting with the divine.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. We're not just talking about a general concept of cleanliness, right? The text gets incredibly specific, especially when it comes to wudu.
Oh, absolutely. Wudu involves a precise sequence of actions, each with its own spiritual and hygienic significance. It's not just about washing your hands and face, it's about purifying very specific parts of the body in a very prescribed manner.
Yeah, the text even mentions things like washing between your fingers and toes, sniffing water into your nose and blowing it out. And it gets even more specific, talking about using stones for cleaning a certain number of times. And that number has to be odd. What's the reasoning behind all these details?
Well, in a way, it's about cultivating mindfulness. Even in these seemingly mundane acts, each step in wudu, it serves as a reminder to purify not just the body, but also the heart and mind, like the odd number of repetitions. That could be seen as a way of emphasizing the singularity of God. It reinforces the Islamic concept of tawhid, the oneness of God.
It's fascinating how these seemingly minor details carry such profound spiritual weight. It's like it transforms a routine act of washing into this ritual of purification, preparing you for prayer. And speaking of rituals, the text also describes ghusl, the full body washing, in great detail.
Right, ghusl is required after certain events, like sexual intercourse or menstruation. It's a much more comprehensive purification ritual. It involves washing the entire body. And just like wudu, it has very specific guidelines.
The text even mentions how the prophet used his left hand to pour water over his right hand during ghusl, and then rubbed his hands on the wall or ground after cleaning his private area. Why these very specific actions?
Well, Islamic rituals often blend practicality with symbolism. Using the left hand for pouring water, it actually aligns with hygiene practices in many cultures. The left hand is traditionally used for cleaning, and then rubbing your hands on the wall or the ground, you could see that as a final act of purification, ensuring that no trace of impurity remains.
It reinforces the idea that purification is not just about physical cleanliness, but about cleansing your heart from negative thoughts and intentions as well. And it's interesting how the text doesn't shy away from presenting differing opinions on these rituals. Like, for instance, there are debates about the amount of the water needed for wudu.
Yeah, exactly. Some scholars emphasize using a minimal amount to avoid waste, while others believe that using more water is preferable as long as it doesn't lead to extravagance. It kind of highlights the role of scholarly interpretation in Islamic jurisprudence, and the recognition that there can be legitimate differences of opinion on certain matters.
So it's not about blind adherence to a single interpretation, but about understanding the underlying principles and applying them thoughtfully, taking into account factors like resource conservation and individual circumstances. And these debates, they extend beyond just water usage, right?
Oh, absolutely. There are differing opinions on whether wiping over socks is permissible instead of washing the feet, and whether reciting the Quran is allowed while menstruating. These varying perspectives really showcase the dynamic nature of Islamic thought. It's constantly evolving to address new contexts and challenges.
It's a good reminder that Islam is a living tradition, adapting to the needs of its followers while staying true to its core principles. And this deep dive wouldn't be complete without talking about the Qibla, the direction Muslims face during prayer.
Right, the Qibla. It's the direction towards the Kaaba in Mecca. It's so central to Islamic prayer. It acts as this unifying force, reminding Muslims all around the world of their shared faith and the focal point of their worship.
Yeah, the text emphasizes facing the Kaaba. It even prohibits facing or turning your back towards it during certain actions like defecating or urinating. It really highlights the sanctity of the Kaaba and the reverence that Muslims hold for it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It speaks to the importance of maintaining a respectful posture, even in private moments. And it's not just about physical orientation. It's about aligning your heart and mind towards the divine, regardless of your location or circumstance.
And the text shares this really fascinating anecdote about Muslims in Ashram. They had to adapt to lavatories that were built facing the Qibla. Imagine their predicament. They had to turn away from the Qibla while using those facilities, and then seek forgiveness for the unavoidable deviation.
It's a really beautiful story. It illustrates the commitment to upholding Islamic principles even in challenging situations, and it also showcases the flexibility of Islamic law, seeking to accommodate those practical considerations while preserving the sanctity of religious obligations.
And it clarifies that the Qibla is a broad direction, not a precise point. So it offers a degree of flexibility in determining the correct orientation for prayer.
Exactly. This flexibility ensures that Muslims can fulfill their prayer obligations regardless of their geographic location or any architectural constraints they might face. The essence is to align oneself with the direction of the Kaaba to the best of their ability.
Speaking of prayer, the text also delves into the postures and actions. It stresses stillness and focus throughout the prayer. I remember it mentions the Prophet saying that prayer is not accepted if one is not at rest in their back while bowing and prostrating.
Right, it underscores the real purpose of prayer, to detach from worldly distractions and connect with the divine. Every movement in prayer, from standing to bowing to prostrating, has its own significance. And performing them with stillness and focus allows for a much deeper spiritual connection.
And there's this other seemingly minor detail the text mentions. It's dislike to smooth pebbles while praying.
Yeah, that little detail speaks volumes, about the level of concentration expected during prayer. Smoothing pebbles, even with a seemingly good intention, could distract from that focus. You're shifting your attention from the spiritual to the mundane. It's a good reminder that prayer is not just about physical movements, but about cultivating inner peace and communion with God.
Okay, so we've covered wudu, ghusl, the Qibla, the importance of stillness during prayer. But what about the call to prayer, the adhan? How does it fit into all of this?
The adhan is more than just an announcement. It's really a powerful symbol of the community aspect of Islam. It's a call to unity. It invites Muslims to gather for prayer and reminds them of their shared faith. It transcends geographical boundaries. It echoes across cities and villages. It's like creating a spiritual tapestry that unites Muslims worldwide.
Yeah, the text details the role of the mueddin, the one who announces the call to prayer, and the etiquette surrounding entering and exiting the mosque. It's amazing how much care and attention is given to even these seemingly peripheral aspects of prayer.
Well, these details highlight the importance of respect and decorum in Islamic practice. Entering and exiting the mosque quietly, listening attentively to the adhan, preparing oneself physically and mentally for prayer, it all contributes to creating this atmosphere of reverence and spiritual focus.
And the text really explicitly highlights the importance of praying in congregation, emphasizing the greater reward associated with it. It even outlines the etiquette of forming rows and the role of the imam, the leader of the prayer. This communal aspect of prayer really stands out.
Praying in congregation fosters a sense of unity and belonging, reminding individuals that they are part of a larger community striving for the same goal, closeness to God. Standing shoulder to shoulder with fellow Muslims, irrespective of their social status, ethnicity, or background, creates this powerful sense of brotherhood and shared purpose.
It's a beautiful testament to the egalitarian nature of Islam, where everyone stands as equal before God. Now, the text also mentions specific types of prayers.
You mean like Jumu'ah, the Friday prayer, where Muslims gather for a congregational prayer and listen to a sermon?
Yes, and the text emphasizes the requirement for ghusl before Friday prayer, highlighting its special significance.
It sets Jumu'ah apart from the daily prayers. It emphasizes its importance as a weekly communal gathering for spiritual reflection and reinforcement.
It's a time for collective learning, spiritual rejuvenation, and strengthening those bonds of community. But let's shift gears a bit now and focus on another type of prayer that holds a special place in Islamic practice, the night prayer, Al-Witr.
Yes, Al-Witr. It holds a unique position within the nightly prayers. It's highly recommended but not obligatory, typically performed after Isha, the last of the 5 daily prayers.
What makes Al-Witr so unique?
Well, for one, its structure is quite flexible. It can consist of 1, 3, 5, 7, or even 9 rakas, but it always ends with an odd number. This flexibility allows individuals to tailor the prayer to their own spiritual needs and time constraints.
Interesting. Why the emphasis on an odd number?
Well, it's believed that odd numbers hold special significance in Islam. They represent completeness and perfection. The Prophet himself is reported to have said, Allah is odd and he loves the odd. So the odd number of rakas in Al-Witr could be seen as aligning oneself with the divine attributes.
That's powerful, aligning with the divine through these seemingly simple actions. Now, are there specific surahs or supplications recommended for Al-Witr?
While there are no fixed surahs prescribed for Al-Witr, certain supplications are highly recommended, particularly in the final rakah. One such supplication is the Qunut, It's a special dua recited while standing, a really moving supplication seeking guidance, protection, and forgiveness from God.
So Al-Witr is really like this deeply personal conversation with God, a time to express your needs and desires. And the flexible structure allows individuals to tailor it to their own unique spiritual state.
You could say that Al-Witr embodies the essence of Islamic practice. There are clear guidelines and structures, but also the space for personal interpretation, spiritual exploration, and adaptation to individual circumstances.
It's that beautiful balance between structure and flexibility, guidance and personal expression. Wow, we've covered so much ground already today. Wudu, ghusl, qibla, prayer postures, atan, congregational prayer, jumu'ah, and now on vitr. And there's still more to unpack from Sunan al Tirmidhi.
You're right, we've only just scratched the surface. There are many more fascinating insights waiting for us in the remaining chapters.
But I think our listeners could use a moment to process everything we've discussed so far. What stood out to you the most from what we learned about Al-Witr?
I think it's amazing how such a seemingly simple act of prayer can hold so much depth and meaning. The flexibility and structure, the emphasis on odd numbers, and the recommended supplications all contribute to a really unique spiritual experience.
Absolutely. We'll be back soon to continue our deep dive, exploring the nuances of Eid prayers, prostrations of forgetfulness, and the role of supplication and remembrance in Islam. Stay tuned.
What intrigues me about Al-Witr is how it embodies that balance, between structure and personal devotion. You have the guidelines, the odd number of rahas, the recommended supplications, but then you also have this freedom to kind of personalize it according to your own spiritual state. It's like a framework for this intimate conversation with the divine.
It's a beautiful example of how Islamic practices offer that guidance while allowing space for that personal expression. Speaking of special occasions, though, Sunan Tirmidhi also mentions Eid prayers, right?
Oh, absolutely. Eid prayers mark those two significant occasions in the Islamic calendar. Eid al-Fitr, which celebrates the end of Ramadan, and Eid al-Adha, commemorating the Prophet Ibrahim's willingness to sacrifice his son as an act of obedience to God.
Eid prayers are so well known for their joyous and communal atmosphere. What sets them apart from like the daily prayers?
Eid prayers are unique in several ways. For one, they're held in these large open spaces, often parks or public grounds, allowing the entire community to come together in a spirit of unity and celebration. And secondly, they involve these specific additional takbirs, which are pronouncements of God's greatness interspersed throughout the prayer. These takbirs really add to the celebratory mood and emphasize the grandeur of the occasion.
So even in these large-scale gatherings, you still have that attention to specific details and practices that connect back to the Prophet's example. It's a beautiful thread of continuity, linking Muslims across generations and geographic locations.
Exactly, and the text even mentions the specific surahs that the Prophet would recite during these prayers, Surah Qaf and Surah Al-Qamar. Surah Qaf, with its reflections on the Day of Judgment and the power of God's creation, serves as this reminder of the ultimate purpose of life, even amidst all the celebrations. And then you have Surah Al-Qamar with its imagery of the splitting of the moon, this miraculous sign of God's power. It reinforces that message of faith and inspires awe and wonder.
It adds another layer of meaning to the Eid prayers, right? Choosing those specific surahs. It reminds us of the spiritual significance even in the midst of those joyous celebrations.
And here's something really interesting. The text also addresses the permissibility of women attending Eid prayers. While some scholars held more restrictive views, the Hadith of Umayyah explicitly states that women, even those in menstruation, were encouraged to attend, although they would stand apart from the main prayer area.
That's a really crucial point.
Yeah.
It highlights the inclusivity of Islam and its sensitivity to the diverse needs and circumstances of individuals. That emphasis on women's participation in this communal celebration reinforces the importance of their presence and their contribution to the spiritual life of the community.
It challenges that misconception that Islamic practices are like monolithic or inflexible. Instead, it shows this commitment to accommodating individual needs within the framework of those shared religious obligations.
These insights are really helping me to appreciate the nuanced approach Islam takes toward its practices. It's not just about rigid adherence to rules, but about understanding the spirit behind the rules and applying them with wisdom and compassion.
Absolutely. And the text does a fantastic job of bringing these practices to life, through real-life examples and anecdotes. Remember the story where Umar sees someone arrive late for Jumu'ah prayer, and they've only performed wudu, and he exclaims, "And wudu again! I know surely that the messenger of Allah has ordered ghusl."
It's like this seemingly small detail, but it reveals so much. about the personalities and the commitment of the early Muslims to upholding the Sunnah. Umar's concern, it reflects that importance placed on following the Prophet's example, even in matters that might seem minor.
It reminds us that these weren't just abstract rituals. They were woven into the fabric of everyday life, shaping their actions and interactions.
It makes those practices feel so relatable, so human. It reminds us that they too grappled with questions and strive for excellence in their worship. Speaking of striving, what happens when we make mistakes during prayer? The text mentions something called prostrations of forgetfulness, right?
Yeah, the prostrations of forgetfulness or sujud asa, they're such a beautiful example of how Islamic rituals accommodate that human fallibility. We're not perfect, we all make mistakes, and mistakes are bound to happen, even during prayer.
So what exactly are these prostrations, and when are they performed?
Well, if you accidentally omit or add an action during prayer, you can perform two prostrations, either before or after the final salutation, to compensate for the mistake. It's a way of acknowledging the error and seeking forgiveness from God without invalidating that entire prayer.
It's like a built-in safety net,
Yeah.
allowing you to rectify those mistakes without undue anxiety or stress. It shows that Islam recognizes the reality of human imperfection and offers a path for correction without that harsh judgment.
Exactly. It's not about achieving this perfect robotic precision in prayer. It's about striving for excellence while recognizing that we are human. We're prone to errors. And sujud, as saw, allows us to acknowledge our imperfections while maintaining the integrity of our prayer.
This concept of acknowledging our limitations and seeking forgiveness really resonates with me. It's like a reminder that our relationship with God is based on humility
Yeah.
and seeking His mercy, not on achieving some unattainable standard of perfection.
Absolutely. It shifts the focus from outward actions to the inward state of our hearts. It's about recognizing that even in our imperfections, God's mercy is vast and encompassing.
We've covered so much, from purification rituals to prayer postures, specific prayers like Jumu'ah and Al-Witr, and even how to handle those mistakes during prayer. But I feel like there's this deeper layer we haven't fully explored yet, something beyond just the physical actions.
You're talking about that inner dimension of Islamic practice, right? That emphasis on supplication and remembrance of Allah.
Exactly. Sunan al Tirmidhi emphasizes that prayer isn't just about movements and recitations, it's about cultivating a heart that is constantly connected to God.
Absolutely. Prayer is a means of communication with the divine, not just a set of rituals. Supplication or dua is this direct line to God, a way of expressing your needs, your fears, your hopes, your gratitude to the one who hears and responds.
So this ongoing conversation, a back and forth between the human and the divine. We have the structured framework of prayer, but then we also have these more personal, more spontaneous expressions of devotion through dua.
And don't forget deepen, that remembrance of Allah through specific phrases or prayers. Dhikr helps to maintain that connection throughout the day. It infuses even mundane activities with spiritual significance.
So it's about weaving the remembrance of God into the fabric of our lives,
Yeah.
not just confining it to specific times and places.
Exactly. And Sunan al Tirmidhi provides those practical examples of how to integrate Dhikr into our daily lives. It advises against talking during prayer. It stresses responding promptly to the call to prayer.
Right, those examples highlight the importance of respecting that sacredness of prayer and acknowledging the call to connect with God.
They serve as reminders to prioritize our spiritual obligations and to make space for God in the midst of our busy lives. It's about cultivating that state of constant awareness, seeking His presence in every moment.
These insights are truly enriching. I'm seeing these Islamic practices not just as this set of rules, but as a way of life, as a path towards cultivating a heart that is connected to the divine in every aspect of our being.
That's the beauty of exploring these texts. They offer us these glimpses into the richness and depth of Islamic tradition, and they inspire us to deepen our own understanding and practice.
This has been such an enlightening journey so far. But before we delve any further into the world of Sunan al Tirmidhi, we need to take a short break. When we return, we'll be exploring some of those fascinating stories and anecdotes from the text and reflecting on those key themes that have emerged from our deep dive. Stay with us. Welcome back to Echoes of Ihsan. It's been quite a journey exploring the world of Islamic purification and prayer rituals, through the lens of Sunan al Tirmidhi, Volume 1.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? From the steps of wudu and ghusl to the significance of facing the qibla and maintaining stillness during prayer. It's amazing how these practices bring together physical actions with spiritual intention and a deep connection with the divine.
It really has been an enriching experience uncovering all these layers of meaning within these practices. As we wrap up this deep dive, though, let's take a step back and consider what are the key takeaways here? What are the overarching themes that connect all these practices?
One major theme that really stands out in Sunan al Tirmidhi is this interconnectedness of the physical and the spiritual in Islam. It's not enough to just go through the motions. There's a deeper spiritual dimension to every action. We see this so clearly in wudu and ghusl. They're not just about hygiene, but about preparing your entire being, body, heart, and mind for prayer.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. The physical cleansing acts as this symbolic purification of the heart and mind, creating that state of readiness for communion with God. And this concept goes beyond just purification rituals. Think about the emphasis on facing the Qibla even when using the restroom. It's a constant reminder that even our most private actions should be performed with awareness and respect for the divine.
Right. It's about recognizing that every action, no matter how insignificant, can become an act of worship if it's performed with the right intention.
And speaking of intention, that's another major takeaway from exploring Sunan al Tirmidhi.
Yeah.
The text constantly emphasizes that prayer is not just about reciting words or performing movements, but about cultivating a state of presence and focus, really connecting with God on a deeper level.
Yeah, it reminds me of that hadith where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says that prayer is not accepted if you're not at rest in your back while bowing and prostrating. It's a powerful image that shows us the importance of being fully present in the moment, not just going through the motions. It's about bringing our full attention and heart to the act of prayer. And this mindfulness, this intentionality, extends beyond the prayer rug. It's about carrying that same level of awareness into our everyday lives.
Exactly. Remember that story about the donkey passing in front of the prophet and his companions during prayer? They didn't let it disrupt their focus at all. They just maintained their composure and continued their prayer. It demonstrates this remarkable level of concentration and devotion.
It's a lesson in maintaining that connection to the divine, even amidst distractions and unexpected events. It's about anchoring ourselves to our spiritual center, allowing that connection to guide our responses, even when things around us might be chaotic.
It's a powerful image of resilience and unwavering focus. And speaking of connection, Sunan al Tirmidhi also highlights the importance of community in Islamic practice. From the call to prayer that echoes across the globe, uniting Muslims in a shared act of worship, to the emphasis on congregational prayer and those joyous gatherings for Eid prayers, it's clear that Islam fosters this sense of belonging and collective responsibility.
Absolutely. These communal practices remind us that we're not alone on this spiritual journey. We have a community to support us, to guide us, to celebrate with us. The act of praying together, standing shoulder to shoulder with people from all walks of life, it strengthens those bonds of brotherhood and sisterhood, reminding us that we're part of something much larger than ourselves.
And it's not just about performing rituals together. It's about learning from each other, sharing perspectives, and enriching our understanding of the faith. We see this so clearly in those debates and interpretations surrounding certain practices, like the amount of water needed for wudu, or the permissibility of wiping over socks.
Right, those differing opinions presented with respect and an openness to diverse viewpoints show that Islamic thought is dynamic, it's evolving, constantly seeking to address new contexts and challenges while staying rooted in the core principles of the faith. It's about engaging with the text, grappling with its nuances and striving to apply its wisdom to our lives in a meaningful way.
It's a testament to the intellectual vibrancy of the Islamic tradition, where critical thinking and reasoned debate are encouraged as a means of deepening understanding and strengthening faith.
Exactly. It's not about blind acceptance. It's about engaging actively with the text and tradition, seeking to extract its wisdom, and apply it to the complexities of contemporary life.
So as we conclude our deep dive into Sunan al Tirmidhi, we've explored these intricate details of purification and prayer rituals, uncovered the importance of intention and mindfulness, and witnessed that vital role of community and flexible interpretation in Islamic practice. But I have one final thought-provoking question for you and for our listeners. If these practices are ultimately about cultivating a heart that's constantly connected to the divine, how can we extend that mindfulness and intentionality beyond the formal acts of worship and into every aspect of our daily lives?
That is a powerful question, and I think it's one that each of us needs to grapple with individually. How can we bring that same level of presence and awareness, that same reverence and intentionality to our work, our relationships, our interactions with the environment, even our moments of solitude? How can we transform the mundane into the sacred, infusing every moment with the remembrance of God. How can we make our entire lives a prayer, a continuous act of devotion and gratitude?
I think that's a perfect note to end on, a challenge, an invitation to keep exploring, to keep deepening our understanding and our practice. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Sunan al Tirmidhi. May your pursuit of knowledge be a source of blessing and enlightenment this